Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Beauty has varied throughout time, various cultures, and the vast different perceptions of the world. Beauty has been defined in so many ways. Today on rLounge, we hear of some in-laws who are blind to the true meaning of the word. In-laws humiliated me, calling me ugly, so I made them homeless. I'm 31 female, married to my college sweetheart, Lior, 31 male. Lior and I met in our college, and since then, we've been inseparable. We both studied finance. After our graduation, while I got a job at a bank, Lior didn't opt for a job. Instead, he chose to open his own company. I fully supported him in his venture. It took him more than 5 years to build his company, and when it was picking up the momentum, the pandemic hit. It was the most difficult time for small business owners. After exhausting all the capital in the 3 months of lockdown, Lior finally had to shut down his business because the market was still volatile and uncertain. Besides, his company dealt with finance consulting for small businesses, so as the small businesses shut down, his company also felt the heat. Luckily, I had a stable job, so I was able to support Lior in all ways. We were living together, and the COVID lockdown made us realize that we could spend our life in quarantine with each other. So, as soon as the restrictions got easier, we got hitched. But it was not as easy as it sounds. The problem was Lior's family. There is no subtle way to put this, but they hated me because I did not fit into their definition of beauty. My mother-in-law has hit her 60s last year, yet she looks no older than 45. She has green eyes, a sharp, pointed nose, and a slim figure, even at this age. Even my father-in-law looks very handsome in his mid-60s. Not to mention their good genes have passed on to my husband, Lior, and my sister-in-law, 34 female. She is married with 2 kids who are in elementary school, yet she looks like she is in her 20s. And what shall I say about my husband? He is no less than a Greek god. That's what the girls used to call him in college. Although everyone swooned over his charm, he never took his looks seriously. Even when he fell for an average-looking girl like me, people frowned at his choice. But neither he nor I looked at beauty as a parameter to judge others. We both considered it to be so shallow. There were many beautiful divas in the college who tried to get Lior's attention, but he never fell for beauty. I was sharp and intelligent with a good sense of humor, and I think that's what made Lior fall for me. It was on Lior's birthday when I first met his family. We were still in college, final year. Lior introduced me as a friend because his aunts were also present at the party, and he didn't want to embarrass me. But Lior's family understood that I was more than a friend because I was the only one he had invited to the party from his college. The rest were his school friends. I won't say his family treated me badly that day. They were sweet. His sister was not present, and his father also left the party after the cake cutting. It was just his mother, his aunts, and his friends. So I mostly got to interact with his mother that day. A few days after the birthday, his mother asked him if he was going to marry me. Lior chuckled and said it was too early to say that. We were still in college. His mother said to think carefully before choosing any girl for marriage because he had such good genes that should not get spoiled. Lior laughed at her and didn't pay attention to this. Lior had grown up hearing about their so-called good genes, so he doesn't take them too seriously. Of course, Lior didn't tell me about this at the time. I got to know much later about it, and it was hurtful. Fast forward to 2 years ago, when the second wave of COVID subsided. We informed our parents that we wanted to get married. My parents were delighted, but Lior's were not. His mother was the first one to object. They said they were fine until Lior was just having fun with me, but they cannot let substandard beauty brood their heir. Yes, this was exactly what they said. They despised Lior for making such a poor choice of a woman who would not be able to make beautiful babies. I was so disheartened when I got to know this. Lior was reluctant to tell me the truth about his family's apprehension about me, but I pestered him to speak. I almost broke up with him and ghosted him because I could not let them judge me because of my looks. However, Lior was able to talk me through this. He genuinely loved me and always made me feel beautiful. Besides, he always celebrated my small wins, even if his career was drowning. He had no male ego and was proud of my successful career. All these reasons outweigh his family's opinion about me, and we got married. His family was not happy, but they attended it as a guest. Lior and his family used to live in a rented apartment, but when his business hit off well pre-COVID, he bought a house for them. However, during the pandemic crisis, his financial conditions got so worse that he was on the verge of selling his house because he could not pay the EMI on the house. I intervened and gave him the money and saved his house. Lior is a man of self-respect, so he transferred the ownership of the house to my name since I had paid 85% of the property EMI. Lior's family adored him for buying a house for them, hence, we didn't tell them about the crisis. Due to my in-laws' cold attitude towards me, Lior and I stayed away from them. I insisted Lior visit them on special occasions. After all, they are his parents and they love him. I tried to distance myself from my in-laws as much as I could. but there were a few occasions which I could not avoid. Last week it was my father-in-law's 65th birthday, and Lior wanted a grand celebration. His mother and sister were also excited to throw a party for my father-in-law. I was excited too, but was equally worried because they made me feel conscious about myself. I wanted to skip it. I knew Lior wouldn't have objected if I skipped it, but I attended it for his happiness. I didn't expect the party to be that crowded. In my 2 years of marriage, it was the first time I was meeting so many relatives and family friends of Lior. Most of them were sweet to me, except 2 of Lior's aunts from his mother's side. They were not rude, but definitely rolled their eyes and curled their lips. I heard one of them saying that my mother-in-law used to make fun of others' flat noses and fluffy bodies, and now her daughter-in-law, me, also has the same features. I felt so terrible that I almost broke down. If this was not enough, my mother-in-law had her own way of humiliating me. I think my mother-in-law got to know that her sisters were gossiping about me. Soon after that, I saw her pulling Lior into the corner and yelling at him. At first, I wanted to stay away from it, but then I realized that it was about me because Lior was looking at me in between their argument. So, I went there and asked what was the matter. My mother-in-law pounced on me as soon as I was there. She yelled, You are the problem. I have told Lior 1,000 times not to bring you to the parties. People mock us for letting our handsome son marry such a weird-looking woman. He has already disgraced us enough by marrying you. Lior tried to stop, but she snapped at him and continued. By then, I had also lost my politeness and asked her why she hated me so much when I had done nothing wrong to them. She yelled again, Because you are ugly. Don't you understand that? I told Lior I could not stand them anymore and left the party. Lior came running behind me, not to stop me but to accompany me home. He kept saying sorry throughout our way back. He said he would cut off his family and would never let them disgrace me. Since I couldn't unleash my anger on his mother, naturally I was angry with him. When my anger subsided, I realized it was not his fault. He stood up for me. That incident shattered my self-confidence so badly that I started feeling conscious about my facial features and my body. I knew I had to do something about it, but I just couldn't figure out what. That same week, I went to meet my parents. My father had a knee problem and their house didn't have handrails and stair climbers. My mother was telling me that it was becoming difficult for them to live without it. They also lived in a rented house, and the owner didn't let them install these accessories. So they were looking for a house with these accessories. They lamented not having a house of their own. I felt terrible about their condition. My parents didn't have a house because they had spent all their savings on my education. They didn't let me take an education loan. Instead, they funded it fully. In fact, after getting a job, I was saving up to buy a house for them. But when I saw Lior selling his house, I gave him the money. I realized I had been a fool to let my in-laws live in my house where they could boast about their status and so-called beautiful genes while my parents lived in a rented house. So, I went home and told Lior that I wanted the house. I told him it was unfair for my parents to spend everything on me and not get anything in return. On the other hand, Lior's parents didn't do anything for him. He took an education loan for his college, plus did odd jobs for his other expenses. If we had to be fair, my in-laws don't deserve my house. Lior asked me if I was doing this in anger, and if my in-laws apologized to me, would I change my mind? I said I was definitely upset about the incident, but also, I'm being fair here. I'm taking what is mine. He insisted that I let his parents stay in the house while he would pay back the money I had invested in the house. He also said that he would ask his parents to apologize to me. Although I wanted the house for my parents, I was in two minds to kick out my in-laws. So, I agreed to Lior's proposal. It was not because their sorry would change anything, but I can't let myself be treated like a doormat. They need to apologize to me. So, the next week, Lior called them home along with his sister and her husband. I was cold to them, just as they were to me. Lior gathered them into the living room and said he had an announcement to make. His mother blurted out, "Don't tell me your wife is pregnant. We cannot have another ugly member in our family." Lior lost his crap and yelled at his mother and his laughing sister. He told me that he is leading a good life because of me. Otherwise, his fluctuating business would have starved him and brought him to the streets. His father intervened. "You don't have to be her puppet for that. You married her, and now she is doing her duty. Don't put her on a pedestal." Lior snapped at him and said that he respected me for everything and that they should also respect me because I had let them live in my house for the last 3 years and never said a word. They were shocked to know that the house was mine. Lior told them the truth, that he was about to sell the house when I saved it and paid for 85% of the EMI, hence he had transferred that ownership to my name. They didn't say anything, but they were unremorseful for their actions. Lior asked them to apologize to me. My in-laws got infuriated at his demands and called him a simp. They said it was my duty to help my husband at bad times, and I have done no favors. By the way, Lior wasn't my husband when I helped him. Lior continued to pester them to apologize to me, but they resisted. Instead, they started yelling at me for manipulating Lior against them. The situation got so worse that they said they were disowning Lior. Lior felt so disheartened at this that he asked them to vacate the house. They didn't believe that Lior could do such a thing. Even I was shocked. But Lior gave them the ultimatum of a week to vacate the house, or else he would call the police on them. His words further angered his parents, and they called us names. They stormed out of the house, abusing us. This happened just 3 days ago, but we haven't heard anything from them yet. The thing is, now I'm feeling guilty for putting this idea into Lior's mind. If I had not mentioned about taking back my house, he would have never thought of doing so. No matter how badly I want them to teach a lesson, I also don't want to make them homeless. After that confrontation, I tried to talk to him through this idea, but he was adamant that he could not let his family walk over me. I don't know what's the better way of getting back the house without hurting anyone. You're far too kind, OP. Your in-laws are so superficial, and yet they don't even own their own home or help their son out in times of need. Beauty is far more than what's on the surface. It has more to do with what's in your heart, and your in-laws have proven just how ugly a person can be. They don't deserve to live there or to be a part of your life. They've received enough free handouts from someone they don't even respect. Update 1. Hey there, thanks for the validation. Trust me, I really needed it. I was questioning my morals until then. Rightly so, when they didn't care about my feelings and humiliated me, why should I care for them and let them walk over me? Also, if I don't put them in place, they would torture my children as well. Our children are yet to be born, and they are predicting them to be ugly. Could you believe how much hatred they carry for me? As I mentioned, Lior gave them a week's time to vacate the house. A week passed, but we didn't hear from them. I dared not to bring up this topic in front of Lior because I didn't want to upset him. After 2 weeks or so, he came home fuming. His cousin had called him and told him that Lior's parents had been bad-mouthing us, that we were evicting them from their own house. They are telling everyone that I had instigated Lior against them and are trying to make them homeless. Lior said he was trying to move on from his anger, but now he was adamant about taking away the house for them. More than Lior, they had been blaming me for everything. Lior's sister is also adding to the fire by labeling me as the gold digger and manipulator. That very evening, Lior went to his parents' house. He asked them to put an end to all the disagreements and live peacefully. He didn't ask them to leave the house, but they charged at him and said that they would only be satisfied if he divorced me because they hated me. They called me a B-word and all sorts of names. The argument got so heated that they left the house immediately and went to my sister-in-law's house. Not only this, the next day they sent the packers and movers to shift their belongings to my sister-in-law's house. Lior called them and asked them to move back to the house and not create a scene. We both felt guilty about evicting them from the house, so we decided to buy a new house for my parents and let Lior's parents live in the house they were living in. But they had their unrealistic demands. They demanded that Lior divorce me, and only then they would forgive him and move back. Lior didn't say anything and hung up the phone. We waited for a week to see if they changed their mind and returned, but they didn't. Lior called them again and asked them if they had changed their mind and wanted to return back to the house, but they were stuck to their demands that Lior should divorce me. They also kept talking evil about us to the extent that Lior's uncles and aunts called him and rebuked him for throwing out his parents from their house. Lior decided to expose his parents and told them the truth. They were shocked to know how they could be so toxic towards their own son and daughter-in-law. Lior said that his parents won't return back, so it's better that I move my parents to that house. Like I said, my father had a knee problem, so I started renovating the house with grab rails and installing an in-house elevator. It took a month for us to get the house completed. I moved my parents to that house. They were reluctant to move because they thought it was Lior's house. I showed them the papers and assured them it was legally mine. After a lot of contemplation, they finally agreed to move in. A week after they moved in, my in-laws called Lior and unleashed their anger on them, abusing and humiliating him for shifting my parents to their house. Lior reminded them that they were the ones who had disowned Lior. Lior didn't abandon them. They said they were happy living with their daughter in her luxurious 5-bedroom house and didn't need us. Lior was upset about all this but understood that his parents were toxic and it was better to stay away from them. I don't know if I should be happy or sad about the situation, but I'm definitely satisfied that my parents are living comfortably in the house they deserve. You can't say one thing and then go back on it. If you can't take the threat seriously, how do you expect them to? If anything, they've proved to you even more so why they don't deserve to live in that home. Update 2. Thanks for all the cheering. Hold on, there are more to come. Around 3 months later, my in-laws showed up at our house. They hugged Lior and said they missed him so much. I felt they had been reincarnated because I'd never seen that avatar of them before. They said that families fight, but they don't abandon each other. We both were perplexed by their gestures. They said they regretted leaving the house impulsively because sister-in-law instigated them to do so. They also said that my sister-in-law had not been treating them well. She tortured them mentally for being a burden on her and invading her private life by moving to her house. My husband said there was nothing he could do because of how he had been treated by them. They held Lior's hand and wept. Lior tried to hold back on helping them, but he could not ignore his parents' pleadings. He said he would rent a house for them until we were able to secure a loan and buy another house for them, but they refused. They said they wanted their house and not a rented one. They suggested that my parents move out from there. Lior tried to explain that we had renovated the house with elevators for my parents' convenience, hence they could not be moved out. But they refused to understand. When they saw that Lior could not be convinced, they left the house, murmuring something under their breath. A day later, they went to the house where my parents were living and created a ruckus. My sister-in-law had also accompanied them. They vandalized the front porch, abused my parents, and asked them to vacate the house. My parents tried calling me, but I was in a meeting, so I missed their call. My parents called the police, but when the police arrived, my in-laws gathered the neighbors who told the cops that the house was of my in-laws. They didn't know the truth. Thank God my husband arrived just at the right time. Lior explained the matter to the police and even showed them the soft copies of the property papers. When I got to know, I rushed to my parents and got a restraining order against my in-laws. We also informed the neighbors about the truth. Lior had cut off his parents and told them not to bother us ever. It's been a month since then, and we have not heard anything about them. I knew they were wicked and toxic, but that they could stoop so low was unimaginable. Update 3. I thought my last update would be the end of it, but after a year, I got to know something which made me update this thread, linking the original post and the previous updates below. A few days back, I bumped into Lior's relative at the supermarket, and she told me that my sister-in-law had thrown out my in-laws from her house and had moved them into elderly care. Although my in-laws are not so sick and old despite their age, my sister-in-law had thrashed them in with weak and sick oldies. The relative told me that when she went to meet them, my in-laws were weeping and said that being surrounded by such old and elderly people, they feel they are aging faster. She suggested they reach out to Lior for help, but they said they could not apologize to an ugly woman. You know who they meant? While I'm not rejoicing in their misery, it sounds like a full circle. They were super proud of their good genes and looked way younger than their age. In the end, they are put in a care where they feel they are aging faster than usual. And even in this condition, they refused to let go of their ego and still called me ugly. None of this would have happened if they had just been good people. I'm sorry they treated you so poorly, OP. You're a much better person than they could ever hope to be. Your compassion is radiating. I hope your in-laws have learned something from this. Good looks fade, but a beautiful heart lasts forever. What do you make of this? Should OP have let them stay in the house? Would you have done anything differently? Thank you for following along today. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to share regarding today's content, we want to hear it. See you next time on rLounge.